The vision, a world where all people live free of the burden of drug abuse. This is the Drug-Free America Foundation's Pathway to Prevention podcast, where we are committed to developing strategies that prevent drug use and promote sustained recovery. Thank you for not only tuning in, but your continued support and efforts to help make this world a better place. We hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, everybody. This is Dave Clausen from the team here at Drug-Free America Foundation, and you are listening to the Pathways to Prevention podcast, the show where we chat with stakeholders from across the drug demand reduction spectrum and talk about current trends in the global substance use pandemic, strategies to reduce drug demand, and how to best adapt those strategies to the ever-shifting substance use landscape. Today, we're talking about alcohol prevention with Movendi International, who is the largest independent global movement for development through alcohol prevention. Now, their vision is a life for all human beings free to live up to their fullest potential and free from harm caused by alcohol and other drugs. Their vision is a world of peace, democracy, and justice, where free and healthy citizens actively contribute in all levels of society. Everybody, this is going to be a marvelous conversation. Some true prevention leaders are in the recording studio with me. Team Movendi International, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much for having us.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for having us.
It's been a long time coming, and I am oh so excited for our conversation today. But before we really dive in and unpack Movendi, would love to just learn a little bit more about each of you. Would you share with our audience where you are located in the world, a little bit about your work background, and I'm curious, what led you to working in your roles today? Christina, what you got for us?
Yeah, even the geographical question is not so easy because, I am located in Sweden at the moment. I come from Slovakia and I am also very often there. So physically and in my mind, very often also in Slovakia. And of course, working for an international movement, I travel around and feel home in many countries. But if we should really talk about where I am right now on this planet, then right now I'm in Sweden. And to tell you a little bit more about my background, so I studied psychology, and I have chosen psychology because I already had been involved in the work with the alcohol prevention. And I was really excited by when I learned about the international movement that Movendi was. So then I was a youth activist in this field. And then I really wanted to continue and I wanted to learn a lot about the issues so I could somehow contribute to the work that the movement was doing. And what I was really impressed by was the element of the democracy and the development. So that the Movendi International identified alcohol as an obstacle to development. And I really like the comprehensive approach to development. So I really wanted to contribute somehow. So then I went and studied psychology. But if we go really back in the time why I actually got involved in this one, sometimes I share the story that I wanted to be an actress when I was really little until I was maybe 14. And I was doing everything to be able to be actress. So I wanted to have different experiences. I wanted to do sports. I wanted to know how to play piano, how to ride a horse, like all these things so that I would be really able to act then and have all those experiences. And then I also understood as a child, now we are talking about 6, 7 years old, that the actors also have sometimes troubles by being followed by journalists and some paparazzis, and they digging out some things and I somehow wanted to have also some kind of a clear path when someone would start digging on me. And obviously now when I just look back at it and somehow analyze how I was thinking, then obviously alcohol was in my mind connected with negative things. And I really didn't want to have that connection in any way. I didn't want to have alcohol connected to my life also for the future. So just because I also wanted to be an actress, I somehow decided for myself that no, I really do not want to have anything to do with alcohol. And then I was living really until 14, 15, like that, when my peers already started using alcohol and maybe also some other drugs. And I understood that I am doing very well without it. And I really liked that I could be natural and that I could do anything I wanted. And I felt that the alcohol effects were really not positive that I saw around among my peers. So then it was very clear for me that, okay, I just simply don't want to use the substance and I want to actually engage and enable other people also to be free from it, because I felt that more natural life.
That makes me smile. I hear the heart and the passion there. And I love how that focus has been a part of your life for so many years, and seeing the positive and how your life is better being free of alcohol. That makes me smile. I would love to just unpack that for this whole episode, but we'll save that for another conversation. How about that? Mike, what do you have for us here? Let's pass the mic over to you.
Yeah. Hi, Dave. Thanks for having me and us. My name is Mike Dünnbier. I am Director of Strategy and Advocacy at Movendi International. And I'm looking forward to talking a little bit about what it is that we do in Movendi International. Christina touched upon this kind of addressing alcohol as an obstacle to development. And that is actually also what really inspires me, this kind of personal commitment to making the world better. And then, of course, addressing a really big problem in our families, communities, society, even on the global level. So I got into the work in Movendi International through our European youth movement. I was studying political science and philosophy in Germany, where I was born and raised. And I felt like there is a little bit more for me to do to contribute to making the world a better place than just reading about other people's brilliant thoughts or other people's thoughts that I would disagree with. So I was looking for where I could actually find a channel and a platform for my engagement and to advance social justice. I think that's very important for me. And when I read about the constitution of Movendi International, the work that our youth movement was doing back then, 2005-06, then I felt like home. I had never met anybody from the organization back then, but I felt like this is where I belong. So I applied to do a European voluntary service. I would go to Sweden for a year and work in the office of the youth movement, and really dealt with different dimensions of the prevention work, like organizing European youth events for young people from around the continent, dealing with prevention, but also democracy, human rights issues, developmental issues, as Christina has also said. And I think that just put me on this trajectory, inadvertently, so to say, as it is for young people. I followed my passion. In the beginning, my parents didn't necessarily like it, but they saw that I'm thriving and that I'm happy, and they began supporting this. And I have stuck with this ever since. And later I got employed first in our youth organization. And then since 2011, I'm working with the political work of Movendi International. So that is, in very brief, my story. Physically, I'm in Stockholm as well, like Christina.
Okay, I would love to just have conversations with each of you about your stories. I can tell there's so much wisdom there and insight. And you reminded me of our past episode with Dr. Robert DuPont from One Choice, said preventing adult addiction starts with youth prevention. We're going to have to get into that in this podcast. We are. I would love to learn more about the youth program that helped you get your start with Movendi International. We've been saying Movendi, but we haven't talked about or shared with our listeners, what is Movendi International? So let's do just that. What is Movendi International?
I think that you have actually introduced Movendi International very, very nicely already in the beginning, but of course we can go deep into it. But I think that the sentence that you have said, that it's a global social movement working for development through alcohol prevention, that really describes the organization. And then you have described our vision, which really encompasses also what Mike and I have been talking about, that the work is not the prevention for itself, but it's supposed to lead to something more, as we mentioned, like the development of the societies, of families, of people. And so as a social global movement, we can share with some numbers that we have more than 140 organizations in more than 50 countries around the world. I usually do not say specific numbers because they are changing. We are getting new members from different parts of the world. Recently, we got members from Colombia, for example, from Scotland. And that's just very new, a few weeks ago. So this is really changing and we are growing as a movement. So that would be, if we should describe like the structure, we have member organizations around the world. We have the international board that leads the organization. We actually haven't mentioned it. I'm president of the movement. And then what is it that we are doing is that we are approaching this development through alcohol prevention through a really comprehensive way of addressing the root causes of the problem that we identified in the world, why there is alcohol harm in the world. And we understood that we need to work with several dimensions at the same time, building the social movement and really bringing together organizations that want to engage in this work and like communities together. And then we are working with alcohol policy, and that is the most effective approach to prevention. So that's our main focus. But to be able to do that, we also have to address alcohol industry and expose what the alcohol industry is doing, because they are a huge obstacle to doing the effective alcohol policy. And another problem is the alcohol norm that is really pervasive and is again blocking people's thinking and understanding. And it leads, for example, to underestimating of alcohol harm around the world. So we are also working really actively with analyzing and influencing the discourse, how to talk about alcohol, what is going on, how other people talk about alcohol and how it harms or supports the effective prevention. And then, of course, many of our member organizations, they also work with recovery. So we are covering all the steps in prevention. Maybe Mike wants to add something, not once, but I think he has things to add.
Yeah, thanks, Christina. And to add to what you have said, I think there is this comprehensive theory of change that you explained now. There are 7 elements of it. And I think it's just good to say that we are serious about this description that you also mentioned, Dave. We are a global social movement. So we are a movement of people in the communities affected by the harm that the alcohol companies are causing to us. So we are responding to the harm that we are seeing in our communities. We are heart-driven people. Most of the members of Movendi International are volunteers. They're dedicating their free time, their passion to protecting people from alcohol harm, preventing, reducing, as Christina has said. And so that really means that our members, our people, the movement we work prevention, advocacy, and recovery. So we are the people that are affected. We work for people that are affected, and we want to be a political voice also for these people who are affected. And just this weekend, for example, I was part of an exchange between our German and our Swedish members, learning about best practices in recovery work. And so it's really awesome to meet people who, through our movement, were able to leave prison, criminality, reintegrate into society, build their lives, thrive, and so on. So you can see also how prevention and recovery are connected through the work that we are doing in Movendi International. And many of these people, they become advocates. So they become champions for better alcohol policy solutions so that we don't have people experiencing so much alcohol harm.
Truly global movement. to take on, to set your vision on such a big mission, the global aspect of it? Where are you finding some positive momentum?
Where we are finding it? That's a very interesting, very good question. That's why I was a little bit silent just to reflect on it, because I think that the momentum is really occurring from everywhere. Like there are the small things that the people in the communities are achieving, or really small change. This is, as you said, this is a run on long distance run. And we know that changing, for example, policy, that I said, like, that's the most effective thing. If we have good policies in place, then it will be the world will be a better place like that. But we understand that it will not happen from one day to another. And we also understand that for that to happen, we really need to change very many things in the world. And we need to lift people who want to do this. And I think that's the momentum that I'm experiencing actually every day when someone writes to us what they have come up with and what they are going to do. Some other person asks us what would be the best, how could we approach, for example, alcohol norm, when we understand that someone else adopts a new method, or that we are learning from each other, for example, that we are not stuck in the past and using some methods that are not working. All these things, all these small things actually are huge, and they are moving us forward. And of course, even like a new study, when we understand that academia is also moving forward and is bringing results or bringing data that are helping our advocacy, for example. So every day something is happening that can really help, and it creates the momentum then that is lasting.
I think your question is actually very insightful, Dave. And I always have the benefit, Christina and I, when we are in these different meetings, especially the advocacy meetings, then we have this role division that I complement what Christina is saying. She always gives the first answer, but that means I have the benefit of actually listening to Christina. I'm feeling, I agree with this. This is a good point. Very good that this came up. And so then I can find some things here. So it's exactly like Christina has said. We have this theory of change, 7 areas, and Christina mentioned awareness and discourse. And we can see over time, I think, Christina, you have done this work now for 20 years. I have done this work now for 16 years. So over time, Dave, we can see changes, improvements, like scientists are putting out better studies, and we are understanding the harm better. We are understanding effective solutions better and ineffective solutions. You know, Dave, in prevention, we actually have to face the challenge also that in some communities, we are still doing things that are not evidence-based and that might be harmful, but we are understanding this better. And then, like Christina has said, even the communities are responding better. So they want to learn, they want to take this up. For us, then there is also momentum in, like Christina said, actually we are growing. So we can see that more organizations want to come together. And then we have also policy successes. So here in the European region, we were able to ensure that the member countries of the WHO European region adopted a really groundbreaking framework for action on alcohol here just this September. And like Christina alluded to, at the global level, member states of the World Health Organization also adopted this past May a global alcohol action plan. So there is also increasing recognition that we need to accelerate action on alcohol as a public health priority. So there is actually lots of momentum in all these different areas. But I also wanted to go back to this point that Christina made. Alcohol is an obstacle to development, and everything starts with people and communities. And so for us, there's lots of momentum in, when we as a movement can help people for personal development. So overcoming alcohol and other drugs is obstacle to personal development, or when we through interventions can make communities more resilient, protect them against really these aggressive industries that we have, the tobacco and the alcohol industries. Now there is increasingly also the marijuana industry. So even on these levels, the individual and the community level, there's lots of momentum when you can see that, people are helping themselves or communities are protecting themselves, and there is a transformative change on these levels.
Listeners, I know this is an audio only podcast, but I've been over here just smiling and nodding my head. Yes, listeners probably know it's coming, but one of my big mottos is that prevention is better together, and together we are stronger. And you all are walking, talking examples, living by that. And it made me smile both on the inside and out. You were talking about development and personal development. That really resonated and just gave me a few goosebumps even, because that is a big part of my story of reaching and maintaining sobriety, freedom from alcohol. And that the more I focused on my personal development, my growth to be the best version of me, that's what gave me power to maintain sobriety. I got so lost in the moment, what you were both saying, that I don't even remember what I was going to ask next. So wonderful successes. I know there are a lot more. I was on the website. Y'all are doing a ton. But on the flip side of where you've seen some positive movement, what are some barriers or kind of challenges that you're running into?
Yeah, I think that's also a very good question. And that also could be a separate episode, I believe, Dave. And that is, of course, one of the biggest barriers is alcohol industry and their interference with the work of government and how they are attacking or targeting children already and women and really marginalized populations. It makes me want to cry sometimes or really upset. But then luckily we have the movement that will always give some kind of strength, and that I understand, okay, I'm not alone with this analysis, or we are not alone. We are not a small group of people. It's actually people around the world. So I would say that one of those biggest barriers is the alcohol industry and how they are influencing our minds and our perceptions of ourselves, of other people, of communities, and in a way creating some kind of conflict within ourselves that then cause many people also to then turn to their product. I would say, and another barrier is the alcohol norm that I have also mentioned, that is in the society. It is imposed by the alcohol industry, and it's carried by many of us without knowing that we are doing it. So I think like that analysis and that change is really very important, and actually task for all the people who are active in prevention to deconstruct that alcohol norm.
I think that when I said that this question you ask about where momentum is coming from, that is insightful, because we try to really do a good job of not getting lost in this really difficult situation, right? Because alcohol, the products and practices of the alcohol industry kill one person every 10 seconds, 140,000 people every year in the United States alone. The economic loss, the social loss, the human loss is massive, and we know it. We see it in our communities. I have it in my family. Christina has it in her family. You just mentioned your own story, Dave. So this is present every day basically in every step of our work every day. And so then, I mean, like Christina said, there is this massive alcohol industry. They are among the most profitable industries in the world, even in human history. So they are really there. So now what do? This little movement with heart-driven people. We have to focus on all the steps that put us on the right track, so to say, towards change on personal, community, societal, and then even global level. And one thing that is really important that I wanted to pick up here in where the obstacle is misconceptions about where alcohol harm comes from. And you mentioned it in the beginning, Dave, this prevention of alcohol harm in young people, that adults really care for this, protecting young people. But my experience coming through the youth movement is that adults don't reflect enough about them being the role model, them creating the alcohol norm that Christina has just talked about, them funding the alcohol industry or giving tax breaks to alcohol companies. So it's so easy to be focused on, well, young people really shouldn't engage in binge alcohol use and they shouldn't drive under the influence of alcohol. All these things are correct. All these things are important, but the misconception is, where is the harm coming from? And young people are not creating and causing this alcohol norm. This is adults doing it. And as adults, we are not really good at yet talking about, so what is the alcohol harm? Is the individual person really to blame for 140,000 deaths in the United States every year? Or is there another root cause that we are shying away from really tackling? So I think industry norm and then misconceptions about what is the true nature of alcohol harm, where is it coming from? These are the obstacles that we face and that we try to tackle.
So many thoughts are just flooding in my mind. And yes, I'll try to focus for the sake of our listeners. Part of what I try to do now is sharing my story, talking about why I do what I do to hopefully plant some seeds or cause some ripples in relation to changing the norm, changing the narrative. If I were to say you have to live by example if you want to lead by example, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree, absolutely. That's why I am living alcohol free. And I have decided to do that when I was a teenager, when I had much less knowledge about alcohol and alcohol industry than I have now. So, and already then when I was doing prevention work, for example, in schools with kids, I couldn't imagine that I would be, and I was still then using even old methods of prevention that maybe now are really not approved, like this is good. But already then I realized I cannot be here standing in front of the kids, telling them that this and this product is causing this and this kind of harm, and then just go home or go somewhere and consume it. And what if I am somewhere outside in the streets with my friends and then these kids see me and then I undermine completely what I have said. So then I have really decided also to be alcohol free for the sake of others. And I also have a very, very normal story, or maybe very minor story, I would say, how I realized as a child how a person influenced me, and that person was just one person in the crowd. And really didn't try to influence me in any way. But I think I was maybe 9 or 10 and we lived in a small town and I was then walking with my father. And on the other side of the street, there was another person coming from the opposite direction. And they dropped paper or something and they stopped and picked it and continued walking. And for me, that was wow, this person actually doesn't leave that paper on the ground. And just left. And then I realized, no, I will also always pick it. It's not so difficult, just to bend and pick it and throw it into the trash bin. But it's not only this action that I remembered, but I just simply remember how strong it was to see someone else do something and how it influenced me. And that's why I absolutely agree or think that also being a person, being an example for others, we don't even know whom we influence, when we influence them, how. So as I am trying to be conscious of my actions as much as possible, and I would say that it's easier to live like that. I think it leads me to an honest life, and being honest saves lots of energy, I would say. So yeah, that would be my take on that.
Yeah, let me tell you 3 things. This kind of live by example to lead by example, that is very poetic, very beautiful. In Germany, we have philosopher Immanuel, and I think he has a nice philosophical principle that is very close to live by example, to lead by example. It's the question, how would the world look like if everybody did what I am doing? So how would the world look like if everybody picked their litter, as in Christina's example? Or would the world be better if more people lived free from alcohol? So I think this is a really nice reflection that I try to apply. If I do this now, and if everybody else would do this, would the world be better off or worse off? And so, of course, sometimes it's challenging. I have to be honest to myself. Also, sometimes the more comfortable way is not actually the way that benefits our society. So that's my first point. My second point, just to, I think, underpin Christina's example, there is science from the United States, from the Framingham Heart Study, that shows very clearly how social values travel in social networks. So in networks of relatives, friends, and work colleagues. So they can show through this Framingham Heart Study that if you have a friend who has a higher body weight or who is obese, then your likelihood of being obese is higher. So if you have friends who engage in eating chips all the time, that is a normalized behavior. So, and that applies to alcohol use and many other of these kind of social values, social behaviors. And the alcohol industry knows this. So if we tell each other what is normal, we are social norming specific behaviors. And then we actually create expectations that it's very normal to use alcohol. While if you look at the data, for example, 1/3 of the people in the United States doesn't use alcohol at all. The next third uses very, very little alcohol, which means for 2/3 of the whole population in the United States, alcohol is not normal at all. But if you watch TV, if you walk through New York City or wherever, it looks like alcohol is normal. Everybody likes it. Everybody wants it. So the alcohol industry is also trying to make these examples and create these kinds of images. And that's why it's so important what we as people and as communities do. And so then I just wanted to add, this is my third point then, to Christina's story about living alcohol-free. I think this kind of normalization of alcohol-free environments, alcohol-free decisions, this is very important. And for us in Movendi, it's very important to empower everybody not to promote alcohol. So beyond this, whether people are using or not using alcohol, whether they are staying free from alcohol, it's really important that none of us promotes alcohol so that we don't make jokes about the myths, the mythical effects of alcohol, that we don't help the alcohol industry in their job, so to say. So we have to question our assumptions about alcohol, our conditioning that comes from alcohol marketing. And I think then we are really back at Christina's example there, living truthfully. And I think that is what your point is about, Dave, this kind of living by example, to lead by example, questioning ourselves, the thoughts we have, and the role we play with what we say and do in our communities.
Marvelous wisdom and examples there. Yes, thank you both for your insight, diving into that thought about living by example. So you've shared some of the successes where you found some of that positive momentum, positive movement, and some challenges. And we just dipped our toes into the water talking about opportunities and how, that can start with us, the individual. What are some of the opportunities? What are you all doing? What is Movendi International doing to create change?
I think that the main focus, besides of bringing communities and organizations together and really empowering them and encouraging them to engage in this field, what we are doing is that we do alcohol policy advocacy, and through that create these kind of opportunities for people to live healthy, actually, and to be protected also by the system and also by their own mind. So we are working from both directions, like creating policy that creates environments, but we are also working with people, changing the norm. And I would say that then it's up to people how they navigate, how they work with in the environments that are then created. So I would say that the biggest opportunity are the policies that we know are actually effective and work and save lots of lives and improve even more when there is the limited alcohol availability, that's the public health oriented alcohol taxation, and that's really ban on alcohol marketing. And through this, we actually create an environment where alcohol is not so pervasive, either visually or easily physically available, but also in our minds then. And also the social acceptance of alcohol is also changed also through these policies. And that's the great opportunity then for people to live healthier and happier lives.
Yeah, I really agree with Christina. I think we mentioned this before. What gives us the feeling, really the sensation of having wind under our wings, is rising awareness and this kind of people coming into our movement based on growing awareness that if we support, if we call for, if we request, and maybe even if we support our decision makers to implement these proven high impact, really good policy solutions, that benefits everybody. So that prevents harm, that reduces harm, that generates resources that can be reinvested to actually provide help to people who are experiencing harm right now. Right now, there are big gaps and big problems. We don't have enough mental health and addiction services, basically in any country. In many countries, we have rising alcohol use and rising alcohol harm, especially deaths, but we also have this opportunity actually to build on a different development. And I think that is then the opportunity that Christina is talking about. We can see that people are more health conscious, especially the young generation. So the young people now, they alcohol free much longer. If they start, it's really an if they start consuming alcohol now, they consume less. Young people also quit alcohol. So there is, I think, a consciousness about health and sustainability. Overall, we can also see awareness, I think, sensitization and really community concern about the impact of corporations overall. I think in the United States, people are really aware about big tobacco and the big banks, maybe even big oil. And I think that is true in societies around the world. It might be different industries. And I think we can use this to also increase the understanding, the recognition of the harmful effects of the alcohol industry on our families and communities. And then these two things together, health consciousness, sustainability consciousness, especially of the youth, and literacy about predatory practices of corporations, they can really drive this movement for policy change. And in Movendi, Dave, we are saying policy change drives norm changes. And when we change the norms, then we can really live in much healthier and safer communities in the future.
Policy to change the norms. Yes. Oftentimes when I speak at conferences, one of my main sessions is talking about culture is the strategy. And it speaks to just that, the norms, changing those norms, creating a culture, an environment to where everybody chooses those healthy norms, that healthy way of life. You've shared some about sort of policy, your work, your efforts, your programs around policy. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the development, the way of life, the health promotion side of Movendi International. What are some of the things you have going on there?
I think that when you said development, then I was thinking immediately actually of the sustainable development and the global development. And there, Movendi International has already a few years ago, I would say 2015, has analyzed sustainable development goals to see how alcohol, the lack of alcohol policy is really a hinder to achievement of 14 out of 17 sustainable development goals. And since then, we've been working with it more. We have developed it, and we can see we are really, really glad because we see that many other organizations and institutions are really using this analysis. And that means that we have looked at it and, the sustainable development goals are like achieving gender equality, think power, eliminating hunger from the world, improving the life on land, and creating or enabling access for all people to clean water, for example, creating safe cities. So there are 17 of these huge goals, and 14 out of them will not be achieved if we don't have good alcohol policy in place. So I would this is one of our ways how to really promote development. So we do not stop only at the health level or in the field of only alcohol prevention, but we are using the alcohol policy as a catalyst to achieve other causes that people and organizations and also actually governments.
In terms of programming, I think we have some really cool things that we are doing and that we are also constantly improving. So we are gathering young people from around the world to empower them on some of these issues that we are now discussing. And Dave, I actually have to correct myself. It's not we empowering them. It's we providing the platform for the young people to empower themselves, so to say. It's for, with, and by young people. We call it Sober Youth Hub, and it's really about normalizing free ways of life or even building capacity to promote the benefits of staying alcohol free when it comes to young people, but also how to protect ourselves and our communities against the alcohol industry. And then other issues that really matter for young people. You can think of mental health. Christina now talked about sustainable development, and sustainability is really important, like the environmental dimension there for young people, human rights, human dignity, equality, that we all belong together, so to say. So that's what we do in the Sober Youth Hub. I think we are really proud of that. We have a cool program called Summer LEAP, and LEAP is an acronym for Leadership Academy for Alcohol Prevention. So we bring young leaders together. We'll do it in the summer of 2023 again. And this is, I think, a world-class course for 1 week to learn about all the different aspects of alcohol prevention, as the title says. So policy, norm, and I think that's the maybe the final thing, last but not least. We have, I think, an awesome program. It's an online program, but it's also an in-person program to deconstruct alcohol identities. So now we have mentioned the alcohol norm many times. What does that actually mean? So we provide tools for people and communities to reflect about which role is alcohol playing in their lives, in their communities, and how can we think about this? Where does this come from? Is what we know about alcohol really factual, or is it conditioned and programmed by the alcohol industry through marketing and other tools? How are we using alcohol in addition to that people are drinking it, right? We are also using it and for creating identities, for building up who we think we are. And then, of course, we empower people to ask this question, is alcohol really playing that role? Is it helpful? Is it beneficial to us? So this kind of program is, I think, really interesting, really attractive to many people that we conduct this program with.
I have to just kind of let out a big sigh, because the alcohol identity, that was what I wrestled with for years while I tried to find sobriety. And that alcohol, it changed my identity. I now, when I tell my story, I talk about the Party Dave days. And part of why it took me so long to reach sobriety is that it was so ingrained in my identity. I got so far away from who I truly am, my real, true, authentic self. I didn't even know who that person was anymore. And so for me to try to change, to try to get back to, I'm going to be Dave, I first had to figure out who was Dave, and then who did I want to be? But I'm just kind of reflecting on that journey, and I will put everything I can to lift up this program, Deconstructing Alcohol Identities with Youth. Like, oh my goodness. Like, yes.
We can stay with this a little bit.
Yeah. Tell me more about it. I have chills thinking about the power and the impacts that this could have.
When we analyze the alcohol norm, that means we have to analyze the language we are using to talk about alcohol. And as you understand, we work with people we are people who have never used alcohol. And then we work with people who are struggling to live in sobriety, to overcome really severe addiction. And so on this whole spectrum, this is then really powerful to have these conversations. And people, you will know, Dave, people say things like, I don't party anymore. And what they mean is, I don't use alcohol anymore. Or people say, can we go out for a drink? And what they mean is, can we have beer or ethanol beer, right? That's the active ingredient that people are actually going for. And so then when you look at language like this, you start realizing how ingrained alcohol is for these actually social activities. Because of course you can be alcohol free, you can overcome your addiction and you can go to party. But as a culture, we put an equal sign between party and alcohol use. So that is now what we have to unlearn, that of course there are so many people who are living alcohol free. Even alcohol users can have really great parties and then they just decide, this wedding, I want to be alcohol free because the next day is really important at work. But as a culture, we never reflect it like that. As a culture, we say, I don't party anymore. And we just mean, for me, alcohol doesn't play a role in my life anymore. So I think these are the insights that we are getting then from exactly what you pointed out, like how close is our identity attached to the bottle of beer or the cocktail glass or the bottle of wine. And I think that is really powerful for people, not just young people, Dave, for people to reflect and realize. And I think there's lots of freedom in this, right?
If I can add, for example, this program, the deconstructing alcohol identities, we've been running it in Slovakia with teachers, not only because they deal with young people, but also for them just to understand the whole norm that the young people then are growing up with. And they were very, very thankful. They were like, now we understand why all these other initiatives that we have, like prevention initiatives and police visiting schools and showing different things and testimonials, why they do not work. Because the alcohol identities are so strong and the culture and the norm is so strong that it completely emulates anything that we then hear, like the one-time lecture or some kind of presentation.
So I didn't share before we hit record, but I got married a little over not quite 2.5 years ago. And when we were planning our wedding, our dinner, the venue, the caterer, they were taken back when I said, I don't need any champagne for the toast. Wine for the guests. They don't need wine to celebrate. And it was a small ceremony, small reception, but they had this puzzled, confused look on their face. And was like, we don't need to have alcohol to celebrate our love, our wedding. And it just makes me shake my head, but oh, so true.
This is a great example. And what we know from surveys here in Sweden, we think they should be conducted in other countries as well. What we know here is that societies where the alcohol norm is really strong, like Christina said earlier, where the alcohol norm is really pervasive, people's preferences, they are actually not well reflected. And your example is a really good example for this reality that people, even alcohol users, they don't want to have alcohol all the time in all social events. So there might be a person that actually likes beer, but then this after work is that person doesn't want to have beer because then they have to go and do something else, maybe with the kids. But that after work is really pushing beer on everybody. Like usually weddings are really pushing alcohol on everybody. And your wedding organizers, they just cannot imagine that there can be a really awesome wedding where people have time of their life, where you guys are celebrating your love, as you are saying, without ethanol in drinks. This is just not present in the imagination. So then the preferences of, as I said, there are 2/3 of the adults in the United States. For them, alcohol doesn't matter much. And all these preferences, they're actually excluded. Because then we tend to just prioritize the preferences of the alcohol industry, that alcohol has to be everywhere. And that is really the benefit of this conversation about questioning, well, does alcohol really belong? Does everybody benefit from alcohol being everywhere? No, because environments become much more inclusive if alcohol is not the primary objective. Then more people can join, people in recovery, people who are pregnant, all those different groups. Maybe even young people can join, where we today prioritize alcohol. So your wedding, this is a great example where you have, I think, changed the perception of the wedding organizers. They're the providers of the dinner.
1% at a time, slowly changing. I do like too, how you said is having alcohol there going to benefit everybody. One of a big moment for me on the individual level too was I went through this exercise where I listed the words that I would use to describe myself when I'm at my best. So I defined my best self. And then I looked at that list and said, okay, what is getting in the way of me living those words every day? And it was like getting hit right in the forehead, alcohol. Like that's what was keeping me from being my best self every day. So listeners, check the show notes for a link to deconstructing alcohol identities. How else can our listeners get involved with Movendi International?
Let me think. So Mike has already listed the different programs that we have for young people. Then we have, we are now in a podcast. Yeah. And so we can also mention that Movendi International also has a podcast called Alcohol Issues, where we are discussing very often different science and like scientific studies that have come out. We are talking with some decision makers or like different alcohol issues simply. Then what is there? We also have our weekly newsletters that people can prenumerate. And what we are doing also, we are really carefully curating all the news that are coming out about the alcohol, be it science, alcohol industry practices, also community examples from communities. So they can be found on our webpage where we have a news center, and really it's a very good resource for finding any information that people would like to know about alcohol, for example, gender, alcohol, and big alcohol. Then, and now we mentioned big alcohol many times. So we are very soon launching or relaunching our Big Alcohol Exposed campaign, where we are really supporting more people to expose the industry practices that is basic for all the other work that we are then doing, be it the policy or the alcohol non-change.
Yeah, I think this is great, Christina. The newsletter, the podcast, our social media channels, so people can engage and get in touch, but also follow and really benefit from what Christina explained we are doing in analyzing the world around us, curating this for people and making all these things easily available. I think importantly, people are most welcome to join Movendi International, individuals, but also community groups and organizations. And joining means becoming part of the movement. But joining can also mean get in touch. Let us know if we can support you in local or national advocacy effort for an alcohol tax increase or for raising ban or for reducing the hours of sales points. So we want to support these initiatives. And we are very happy when people really from around the world, from communities in the United States, get in touch for support of these advocacy efforts, these campaign efforts. So I think, Christina, that is probably the last, but really not least point of how people can work together with us, how they can join, how we can make the world a little bit better through preventing alcohol harm.
Together is better. And listeners, remember, check those show notes for links to the website, social media, the podcast. And if you haven't hit subscribe to our podcast, do so. But then also go right over and subscribe to Movendi International's podcast, the Alcohol Issues Podcast. Before we close out this just heartwarming, I don't know how to describe it, but my heart is happy This conversation has been marvelous, but I want to just pause and open up the floor, the microphone to both of you to share any last words of wisdom, insights, or a call to action for our listeners.
Maybe it's fair if I start, Christina, and you have the last word. Very fun spin on developments here. And for me, it's really great talking with you, Dave. I thought that these were really insightful questions that I will carry with me. What I brought with me into this conversation is a story that we just published on our Science Digest about the impact on the US population, killing actually so many people in their working age and rather young people. So I think that my take-home message is that when it comes to the harm that the alcohol industry is causing in our society, it extends beyond health to social development and even economic productivity. And we can prevent this. This is not something that is a natural law that must exist. But the problem is that it's so ingrained, it's so normal that we sometimes don't even see the alcohol harm anymore. And I think podcasts like this, conversations like this, they help to see it and they help to remember that we can do something about it. And in the United States, we really need prevention in the communities and we need societal prevention through these alcohol policy solutions, proven solutions that really work, as Christina said. So this is, I think, so important that we don't just accept the situation in the United States and in other countries, that we remember that we can prevent this and that we really have the tools now to protect so many more people from needless suffering due to alcohol harm.
Yeah, and I'm smiling here, Mike, because I wanted to talk about very similar things. So no, I didn't go first, but I will anyway talk because I made 2 notes. I have written affected people, and I will explain, and not a minor issue. So when I want to talk about affected people, I actually wanted to mention it already in the beginning of podcast that usually when we mention this term, people most probably think of people who have used alcohol and then they have now maybe they are in recovery, and that's the usual or normal understanding of the term. But we all are affected by alcohol use. And you have also mentioned it, Mike. So it's the matter of individual health, but also of social, of community, of families, communities, and also the planetary health. So it really goes beyond. And that takes me to the other point that I wanted to make, because this is also what I sometimes perceive, that the people active in alcohol use prevention are also sometimes feel that this is a minor issue, or like there are more important issue and we have to step back to make to let others solve bigger things in the world. But through really addressing the alcohol harm and preventing alcohol use and reducing it, we really can address also many other problems in the society. And I think that it can really lead to the society that is simply more aware. And then when we are more aware of the world around us, then we can also act upon it much better. And also, I think that the connection between us is of much better and higher quality when we are actually doing it alcohol-free. That, again, the connection is, again, needed for us to create a better world around us. So I would say that the prevention of alcohol use is really not a minor issue. It's a huge thing and a huge contribution to making our world better.
Wonderful words of wisdom. And yes, oh, so important. Listeners, thank you for joining us for this conversation, and share this conversation, this episode, these resources with those in your community, in your network, because together we can make a difference. Thank you both for taking time to have this wonderful conversation with me, sharing your stories about why you do what you do, and also unpacking Movendi International for our audience. Thank you both. It has been an absolute honor and pleasure, and can't wait for us to talk again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dave. It really was a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Dave.
That concludes this episode. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and share this episode with a friend before you leave. And we look forward to seeing you on social media, because prevention is better together. And together we are stronger.